Tonight, we're not here to fix anything, not to understand everything, not to become someone better before you're allowed to rest. This is a quiet space where we gently let go and return to inner peace through soft Zen stories inspired by the Buddha, shared slowly so your mind can soften and your body can rest. Maybe today asked a little too much from you. Too many thoughts, too many worries, too many small things you tried to hold together. And maybe, just for this moment, you're ready to set them down. Here, you don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You are already enough simply by being here, breathing quietly. Just for a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here, sharing this quiet space. Let your breath slow as if it remembers the way home. Let your shoulders soften like they no longer need to carry the world. Tonight, we'll listen to a simple story. A story from ordinary life, carrying a small thread of Zen and Buddhist wisdom. Not to give you more to think about, but to help you loosen your grip. Because suffering rarely ends by force. It softens when we stop holding it so tightly. There's nothing to rush, nothing to achieve, only a gentle drifting into rest, into stillness. Whether you stay awake or slowly fall asleep, this moment is already enough. And now, we begin tonight's journey with these Zen stories. They got home later than they meant to, not because the work was impossible, but because leaving felt like letting something go. The last email, the last check, the last glance at the calendar. The small invisible rituals that made them feel like they were still in control. When they finally stepped inside, the house was quiet. No music, no TV, just the soft sound of the HVAC running a low, steady breath in the walls. A porch light spilled in through the front window, thin and pale. They stood in the entryway for a moment without moving, still wearing their outside self. The jacket, the shoes, the posture. That posture had become automatic over the years, shoulders back, face neutral, eyes alert. The kind of body language that says, "I've got this." Even if underneath the body felt tired in places no one could see. They reached up and loosened the knot of their tie, then paused. Something about the motion made their chest tighten slightly, like removing it would mean admitting how much the day had taken out of them. So they left it on a little longer than necessary. In the hallway mirror, they caught their own reflection. The outfit still looked sharp. The hair was still in place. The expression was controlled, practiced, familiar. They had worked hard to build this version of themselves. Not in a vain way, in a survival way. A long time ago, they learned that being respected felt safer than being misunderstood. That looking capable often meant being left alone. That in certain rooms you had to arrive already armored. And over time, the armor got heavier. They stepped into the bedroom and opened the closet. The hangers were arranged neatly. Shirts grouped by color, shoes lined up like a quiet parade. Everything in its place, everything ready. They slipped the jacket off first. The fabric lifted away from their shoulders like a weight, leaving almost before they noticed it was there. They hung it carefully, smoothing the sleeve, adjusting the collar. It looked like nothing special on a hanger, just cloth. They unbuttoned the shirt, folded it once, then twice the way they always did. The motions were efficient, practiced. In the background, a ceiling fan turned slowly, its soft whir filling the room, like a gentle metronome. They sat on the edge of the bed and stared at their hands. Even without the jacket, they still felt the day on their skin. A meeting that didn't go well. A moment where someone challenged them. The way their voice had stayed steady while their stomach tightened. The way they'd smiled at the right times. It was strange how quickly a person could become a role. At work, they were the one who knows, the one who can handle it, the one who keeps it together. Those titles weren't official, but they lived in people's expectations. And those expectations had their own gravity. They reached for the tie again and finally pulled it loose. The fabric slid through their fingers, smooth and cool, then fell into their lap. For a second, they just held it there. It hit them then how much they depended on the costume. Not for others, for themselves. The clothes were proof. Proof that they mattered. Proof that they belonged. Proof that they weren't the younger version of themselves anymore. The one who had been overlooked, underestimated, talked over. They stood and walked back to the closet, tie still in hand, and hung it beside the jacket. Seeing it there, still quiet, made something inside them shift. If the jacket is just cloth, then what was the power they'd been carrying all day? Where did it actually live? They turned away from the closet and looked around the room. A lamp on the dresser, a water glass, a small stack of books they kept meaning to read. Ordinary objects, indifferent to job titles, indifferent to performance. The room didn't care who they were outside. The ceiling fan kept turning. The air moved gently across their skin, and for a moment they felt the simplest thing. They were still here, not as a role, not as a reputation, not as an image, just as a person in a quiet room with a tired body. They sat down again this time, letting their shoulders drop fully. The release felt almost unfamiliar, like taking off shoes you didn't realize were too tight until they're gone. A thought rose up, soft but clear. What if I'm allowed to be myself after the cloak comes off? It wasn't a question about quitting or escaping. They weren't imagining throwing everything away. They had built a life. They had responsibilities. They cared about doing well. But somewhere along the way, the doing had started to replace the being. And if they were honest, the being had been waiting patiently underneath all of it, like skin under a uniform. They stood and walked to the bathroom, turning on the faucet. Water ran cold for a second, then warmed. They washed their hands slowly, watching the way the water moved over their fingers, clear and simple. No performance, no outcome, just water doing what water does. They dried their hands and returned to the bedroom. On the hanger, the jacket stayed perfectly still. It didn't look impressive anymore. It just looked like something that could be taken off. And that felt like a kind of freedom. Later that night, the house grew even quieter. The sounds of the day had faded. No notifications, no conversations replaying themselves quite as loudly. Just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak as the house settled into itself. They lay back on the bed without turning off the light right away. One arm rested across their stomach, the other along the mattress. Their breathing slowed naturally, without effort, without instruction. Their eyes drifted to the closet again. The jacket hung there exactly as they had left it. Neat, proper, still holding the shape it had worn all day, as if waiting to be called back into service. The tie beside it caught the light, slightly smooth and polished. It struck them how small it all looked from here. Earlier, those things had carried weight, authority, expectation. Now, in the quiet, they looked almost fragile. Temporary. They thought about how easily the world confuses the symbols for the substance. Titles, clothing, access, attention. Those things can open doors. They can make life easier in certain ways. They can protect you in rooms where being seen as powerful matters. But they are not the power. They are the cloak. And cloaks by nature are meant to be worn and removed. The person lying there had worn many cloaks in their life. Student, new hire, expert, leader. Each one had taught them something. Each one had required a posture, a tone, a way of holding themselves. None of them had been false, but none of them had been the whole truth either. They shifted slightly on the bed, feeling the mattress give under their weight. The body underneath the rolls felt steady, solid, real in a way that didn't depend on being recognized. There was a quiet relief in that. They remembered moments when they had been afraid to take the cloak off, afraid that without it they would disappear, that people would stop listening, that they would lose whatever respect they had earned. But here alone in the room, nothing vanished. They were still breathing, still thinking, still present. The respect they needed most tonight wasn't coming from outside anyway. It was coming from the simple act of letting themselves rest. They reached over and turned off the lamp. The room softened instantly, edges fading into shadow. The fan continued its slow rotation, steady and indifferent. In the dark, it was easier to tell the difference between what was carried and who was carrying it. The cloak hadn't given them their voice. It hadn't given them their judgment. It hadn't given them their capacity to care, to decide, to endure. Those things had been there before the jacket ever was. They would be there tomorrow too. Tomorrow they would put the cloak on again. Step back into the world. Play the roles that help things function. There is nothing wrong with that. The cloak had its place. But it wasn't fused to them. And tonight at least they were allowed to set it down. That knowledge settled in gently, like a hand placed on the chest. They didn't need to strip their life down to nothing to be real. They didn't need to reject success to keep their soul. They didn't need to choose between being capable and being human. They could wear the cloak without mistaking it for their skin. As sleep crept closer, one last thought passed through, simple and unforced. Even without the crown, even without the room, even without the name on the door, they were still the one living this life, and that was enough. They didn't remember when it started, not the moment exactly, just the feeling of slowly adjusting themselves to fit, lowering their voice in certain rooms, choosing words carefully, smiling at the right time, holding opinions loosely even when they felt strong inside. It wasn't a lie, it was adaptation, and for a long time, it felt like maturity. That evening, they were walking through their neighborhood as the light faded. Street lamps flickered on, one by one, casting soft pools of yellow on the sidewalk. Leaves crunched underfoot. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then went quiet again. They walked without headphones, hands tucked into their jacket pockets, letting the night sound be enough. The day had been full of small compromises, nothing dramatic, no conflict worth naming, just moments where they felt themselves hesitate before speaking, where they checked the room before responding, where they adjusted not because they were afraid, but because it felt easier to be agreeable, easier to be flexible, easier to be liked. By the time they got home, they often felt strangely tired, even on days when they hadn't done much. The exhaustion didn't come from effort. It came from restraint, from holding parts of themselves back without noticing. As they walked, they passed a small park tucked between two streets. The lights were dimmer there, shadows stretching across the grass. A bird stirred in a tree, wings fluttering briefly before settling again. The sound caught their attention. It was soft, quick, instinctive. They stopped for a moment and looked up, though they couldn't see much through the branches. Just movement. Just the sense of something alive and alert responding to the night without hesitation. It made something tighten in their chest. They remembered a time when they moved like that. Not recklessly, just honestly. When choices came from a clear internal yes or no, instead of a calculation. Somewhere along the way, they had learned to check themselves first. Will this make things awkward? Is this too much? Should I hold back a little? Those questions had become second nature. Protective, sensible, but also heavy. They resumed walking, steps slow and even. The rhythm of their movement matched their breathing, steady and calm. The street ahead curved, slightly disappearing behind a row of houses. They thought about how often freedom is misunderstood. People imagine it as escape, as leaving everything behind, as doing whatever you want without consequence. That kind of freedom had never appealed to them. What they missed was quieter. The freedom to respond without rehearsing. The freedom to say no without guilt. The freedom to say yes without explaining. The freedom to be aligned. They reached a corner where the sidewalk widened. A bench sat under a tree, empty. They paused there, resting one foot on the curb, feeling the cool air move across their face. The truth was, they weren't trapped by anyone else. No one had asked them to disappear. No one had demanded they shrink. They had done it themselves, slowly, out of habit. out of a desire to keep things smooth, out of care. Care can be a beautiful thing, but when it's not balanced, it can turn into a cage. They leaned against the tree and closed their eyes briefly. The bark was rough against their shoulder, solid, real. A thought surfaced not as a challenge, but as a gentle curiosity. What if being myself is enough, even when it's inconvenient? The idea didn't feel rebellious. It felt relieving. They opened their eyes and noticed how quiet the park was now. The bird had gone still again. The street lamps hummed faintly. The night didn't demand performance. They took a deeper breath than before, chest expanding fully, then let it go without controlling the exhale. The body responded immediately, shoulders lowering just a fraction. It wasn't freedom as a grand declaration. It was freedom as a release. They pushed off the tree and continued walking, posture a little looser. Now steps a little less careful. Nothing visible had changed. Anyone watching would see the same person walking home. But inside, something had stretched its wings, not to fly away, just to breathe. They didn't suddenly change who they were. They didn't start speaking louder or saying everything that came to mind. They didn't make bold declarations or redraw the shape of their life overnight. What changed was smaller than that. As they walked the rest of the way home, they noticed how often they'd been holding their breath without realizing it. In conversations, in decisions, in moments where they waited for permission that never actually came. They let their breath move freely now, in and out, matching the pace of their steps. The body responded right away, as if it had been waiting for that signal. At the next intersection, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the sidewalk. For a second, their shadow stretched long in front of them, then fell back into place behind. The image lingered. They had spent so much time trying to stay within certain outlines, certain expectations, certain versions of who they should be, depending on the room they were in. But shadows change with the light. They don't mean something is wrong. They just mean you're still here. They reached their front door and paused before going inside. The house was dark, quiet, familiar. A place where they didn't need to perform, or at least where they were learning not to. Inside, they set their keys down and leaned against the counter, feeling the cool surface under their palms. The day loosened its hold a little more. They thought about how often they'd mistaken safety for freedom. Safety had meant staying agreeable, staying predictable, staying small enough not to disrupt the balance. It had worked in a way. It had kept things smooth. But it had also kept them separate from themselves. Freedom, they were realizing, wasn't about pushing against anyone. It wasn't about rejecting connection or choosing solitude over belonging. It was about alignment. About letting the inside and the outside match, even when that felt slightly uncomfortable. Even when it meant allowing a pause instead of filling the space. Allowing a no instead of another yes. They sat down on the couch and rested their head back, eyes closing for a moment. The quiet wrapped around them, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's TV through the wall. Ordinary sounds, ordinary life. They placed a hand on their chest and felt the steady beat beneath it. That rhythm hadn't changed based on anyone else's approval. It hadn't sped up to impress. It hadn't slowed down to fit in. It just kept going. There was a kind of happiness in that realization. Not the bright celebratory kind, but the steady kind. The kind that comes from no longer fighting yourself. They didn't need to be everyone's version of easy. They didn't need to be endlessly adaptable. They didn't need to earn the right to take up space. Being themselves didn't mean being rigid or selfish. It meant being honest, responsive, alive in their own skin. Tomorrow there would be moments when they slipped back into old habits, when they softened their edges out of reflex, when they forgot. That didn't mean the wings were gone. It just meant they were still learning how to use them. They lay back and let the night settle, fully breathing, slow and even. Somewhere outside, something moved in the dark, unseen, unjudged, simply following its nature. They didn't need to fly away to be free. They only needed to stop folding themselves smaller than they were. And in that quiet decision made again and again in small moments, happiness found room to land. They noticed it while walking along the water. Not the scenery, not the light, just the feeling under their feet, the uneven ground. Small stones shifting slightly with each step, never quite settling where you expect them to. The path followed the edge of a quiet pond, the kind tucked behind apartment buildings or office parks. Nothing dramatic, no signs pointing it out. Just water trees and a thin strip of land people used when they wanted to think without being interrupted. They walked slowly, hands loose at their sides, letting the rhythm of their steps match the sounds around them. Water lapped gently against the bank. Somewhere nearby, a bird moved through the brush, then went still again. It had been a long few years. Not long in the way that comes with constant crisis, but long in the way that comes with pressure that never quite lifts. Responsibilities stacking, expectations accumulating, moments where they told themselves to push through just a little longer. They had learned how to be tough. Not loud tough, quiet tough. The kind that doesn't complain, the kind that absorbs impact and keeps going. The kind that people admire without realizing what it costs. At first, that strength felt like armor. It protected them, helped them survive, gave them something solid to lean on when things felt uncertain. But over time, the armor hardened. They found themselves reacting faster, less patient, less flexible. Certain things rubbed them the wrong way more easily than before. Small frustrations lingered longer than they used to. They hadn't become bitter. They had become rigid. They stopped near the water and crouched down, resting their forearms on their knees. The surface of the pond reflected the sky in broken pieces, rippling with every small movement. Along the edge, stones of all shapes and sizes lined the bank. One caught their eye. A small pebble, light gray, smooth to the touch. No sharp edges, no corners. It fit easily in the palm of their hand. They picked it up and turned it over slowly. This stone hadn't always been like this. Once it had edges, angles, resistance. It had been part of something larger, something solid. Over time, water had met it again and again, wearing it down, not through force but through consistency. The pebble didn't look damaged, it looked complete. They thought about how often they had judged themselves for feeling worn, for not having the same sharpness they once did, for being slower to react, for needing more rest than before. They'd told themselves they were losing something. But holding the pebble now, they wondered if that was true. What if what I'm losing is what no longer serves me? They rolled the pebble between their fingers. It felt grounding, familiar, like something they had known for a long time without being able to name. Life had sanded them down, not gently, not all at once, but steadily, through disappointment, through repetition, through showing up on days when they didn't feel inspired or strong. Each moment had left its mark, not as damage, as shaping. They had learned when to bend instead of break, when to let things pass instead of pushing back, when to stay still and when to move away. Those weren't losses. They were skills. They dropped the pebble back onto the bank and watched it settle among the others, indistinguishable at first glance, yet entirely itself. The pond continued its quiet movement. The water didn't judge the stones, didn't favor the sharp ones or the smooth ones. It touched them all the same again and again, shaping without intention. They stood and brushed their hands together, feeling the grit fall away. Their body felt heavier than it used to, but also more grounded, less reactive, more present. They had been through a lot. That didn't make them broken. It made them shaped. They took one last look at the water before continuing down the path. The sound followed them for a while, steady and soft, like a reminder that change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply leaves you smoother than before. They continued along the path, the pond staying beside them like a quiet companion. The water reflected less sky now, more shadow, as evening settled in. The world felt slower, as if everything had agreed to lower its voice at the same time. With each step, they became more aware of their body. The slight stiffness in the knees, the way their shoulders naturally rounded forward when they were tired. These weren't signs of weakness anymore. They were signals, information earned through time. Once they would have ignored them. Once they would have pushed through, proud of their ability to endure. Proud of being the one who didn't need breaks, didn't ask for help, didn't show where. That pride had served them. It had carried them through difficult years, but it had also taught them to resist softness. They remembered a version of themselves from long ago, quick to react, sharp in conversation, certain in their opinions. That person had felt powerful, unmovable, like a rock that nothing could touch. But rocks that never change eventually crack. The pebble by the water hadn't cracked. It had changed shape. They slowed and rested one hand against the railing near the path, feeling the cool metal under their palm. The contact was grounding, real. A reminder that support doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. They thought about the times life had worn them down in ways they hadn't chosen. Losses that reshaped priorities, responsibilities that narrowed choices, repeated disappointments that softened expectations. Each one had felt like erosion, but erosion hadn't taken everything. It had taken what couldn't last. It had smoothed the sharp reactions, rounded the rigid beliefs, quieted the need to always be right. What remained felt steadier. They realized that being smooth didn't mean being empty. It meant being able to move without cutting themselves on their own edges. It meant fitting into places they once resisted. It meant being touched by life without being damaged by it. They stopped again and looked out across the pond. The surface was calm now, only faint ripples marking where something had passed through. They didn't need to go back to who they were before. That version had done its work. The person they were now carried more patience, more tolerance for uncertainty, a deeper understanding of what mattered and what didn't. Those qualities hadn't come from avoiding hardship. They had come from being shaped by it. They took a slow breath and let it out fully, feeling the tension leave their chest in small increments. The night air felt cooler against their skin, refreshing rather than biting. They started walking again, steps steady, unhurried. They no longer felt the need to defend themselves against the world. They didn't need to be as sharp as they once were to feel safe. They trusted their ability to adapt, to respond, to endure without hardening. Like the pebble, they had learned how to stay whole while changing. And as the path curved away from the water, they carried that knowledge with them, not as a lesson, not as a victory, just as a quiet truth. They hadn't been worn down. They had been shaped into something that could last. There's a small park not far from where he lives. Nothing special. A short walking path, a couple of benches, a playground that's usually empty during the week. He ends up there one evening without planning to. Just a long day, a wrong turn, and the quiet felt easier than going straight home. He sits on a bench with a paper cup of coffee that's already gone lukewarm. The air smells like damp grass and old leaves. Somewhere behind him, a dog barks once and then settles. It's one of those in-between hours when people are heading home but haven't quite arrived yet. Across from the bench is a large tree. Thick trunk, wide branches. Not pretty in a dramatic way. No flowers, no bright color, just there. Its branches spread out unevenly, casting a wide patch of shade even though the sun is already dropping. He notices the tree because it looks in a strange way inefficient. The trunk bends slightly to one side. The branches don't grow straight up like they're supposed to. Some of them twist outward almost awkwardly. It doesn't look like the kind of tree you'd choose for lumber. Too crooked, too unpredictable. If someone were judging it by usefulness, they'd probably shake their head and move on. He thinks about how often he's felt exactly like that. At work, he's reliable but never impressive. He does his part, finishes his tasks, doesn't cause trouble. But he's not the one people point to when promotions come up. Not the one with bold ideas or sharp edges. Just steady, quiet, easy to overlook. He's been called nice more times than he can count. Helpful, dependable. And somehow those words have started to sound like polite ways of saying unnecessary. He breaks off a small piece of the coffee cup lid, rolling it between his fingers. The thought slips in uninvited, as thoughts often do. Maybe I should have been more something, louder, smarter, more driven, more useful. A couple walks past with a stroller. They slow down near the tree and stop. The woman shifts the stroller slightly so the baby is fully in the shade. The man leans against the trunk, stretching his back for a moment, eyes closed. Neither of them looks at the tree the way he did. They don't seem to evaluate it at all. They just use what's already there. The tree doesn't do anything dramatic. It doesn't try to impress them. It doesn't straighten itself or grow taller. It simply stands offering shade without asking who deserves it. He feels something loosen in his chest just a little. There's an old idea he once heard, maybe in a book, maybe from a friend, about a tree that was considered useless because its wood couldn't be cut into clean boards. Too twisted, too soft, too irregular. So it was left alone. And because it was left alone, it grew large, wide. It lived long enough to become a place where people rested, talked, slept beneath its branches. Its uselessness was exactly what saved it. He hadn't thought about that story in years, but sitting here now, it feels closer than it ever did before. What if the parts of him that didn't fit neatly into expectations weren't flaws? What if being overlooked had quietly protected something in him? What if not being chosen again and again had given him space to grow in directions no one was measuring? A breeze moves through the branches above him. Leaves rustle, not loudly, just enough to be noticed if you're paying attention. The sound isn't trying to calm anyone. It's just happening. He realizes he's been holding his shoulders tight. He lets them drop. No big decision. No inner speech about self-acceptance. Just a physical release, like setting down a bag he forgot he was carrying. For so long he's believed that worth had to be proven. That value came from being picked, praised, needed in obvious ways. That if he wasn't useful in the right way, something must be missing. But the tree hasn't earned its place here by trying harder. It hasn't added anything. It hasn't changed itself to match a plan. It simply grew according to its own shape. He watches the shadows stretch longer on the ground. The bench cools under him. The coffee cup is empty now, light in his hand. Maybe the problem was never that he lacked something. Maybe he's been carrying expectations that were never his to begin with. He stands up slowly, not because he's reached a conclusion, but because the moment feels finished. As he walks away, he doesn't look back at the tree. He doesn't need to. The shade remains doing what it's always done without asking to be called useful. He doesn't go home right away. Instead, he walks the long way around the park, following the path that loops past the playground and back toward the street. The ground is uneven, in places cracked from old roots pushing up through the pavement. He watches where he steps, not because it's dangerous, but because the habit feels familiar. Paying attention, staying slightly careful. Near the far end of the path, there's another bench, smaller, half hidden behind bushes. No one ever sits there. It's too far from the entrance, too close to the maintenance fence. Not useful. He smiles faintly at the thought. He sits anyway. From here he can see the tree again, but from a different angle. The bend in the trunk looks more pronounced from this side. One branch droops lower than the others, heavy with leaves. It's not symmetrical, not balanced in the way diagrams like to show. And yet it stands. He thinks about all the ways he's tried to straighten himself over the years. The times he spoke up in meetings, even when he didn't have much to say, just so no one would think he was passive. The jobs he took because they sounded impressive, not because they fit. The version of himself he presented on first dates smoother and more confident than he actually felt. None of it was fake exactly, just edited, useful but tiring. There's a quiet sadness in realizing how much energy it takes to keep sanding down your own edges. How often he's mistaken survival for self-improvement. How many things he's learned to carry that were never truly his. A maintenance worker passes by pushing a cart of tools. The wheels rattle briefly, then fade. The park settles back into its soft, ordinary sounds. Nothing is asking him to be better right now. Nothing is watching closely. That's when it lands not as a thought, but as a feeling. Heavy and gentle at the same time. He doesn't need to add anything. Not another skill, not another explanation, not another version of himself that fits more neatly into someone else's outline. The shape is already here. It always has been. What he's tired of is the extra weight, the labels, the quiet rules he's followed without remembering who set them. The belief that worth is something that arrives later after enough proof has been gathered. The tree doesn't carry proof. It doesn't defend its shape. It doesn't apologize for the way its branches grow. It doesn't compete with the smaller, straighter trees nearby. It simply takes up space season after season, offering what it can by being exactly what it is. He leans back against the bench and lets his head tilt up. The sky has shifted into that pale blue that only shows up for a short time in the evening. Not quite day, not yet night. A few clouds drift by thin and slow. He thinks about how often he's waited for permission to feel okay. Permission to rest. Permission to stop pushing. Permission to be enough without evidence. No one ever handed it to him. Maybe that permission was never something to receive. Maybe it was something to stop asking for. A child runs past chasing a ball, laughing, not looking where he's going. A parent calls out not sharply, just enough to guide. Life moves around him in small, ordinary ways. No one pauses to evaluate whether he belongs on this bench in this park at this hour. Belonging, he realizes, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the absence of resistance. He stands again, stretching his legs. His body feels different than it did earlier. Not lighter exactly, just less compressed. Like something inside has been allowed to take up its full width. As he heads toward the exit, he passes under the wide branches one last time. The shade is thinner now, the sun nearly gone, but it's still there. Still offered. Still unbothered by whether anyone notices. He pauses for a second, not to thank the tree or make a mental note or turn the moment into a lesson. Just to stand. Then he keeps walking. The park behind him grows quieter as he reaches the street. Headlights pass. A bus sighs at the corner. The world continues in its usual, imperfect rhythm. And somewhere between the bench and the sidewalk, something simple settles in. He doesn't need to become more. He only needs to stop carrying what isn't him. The trail isn't difficult. Just a narrow dirt path winding through low trees, the kind people take when they want to move without thinking too much. He didn't plan to come here. He only meant to step outside for a bit to walk off a feeling he couldn't quite name. The air is cool enough to be noticeable. Not cold, just clean. He adjusts the strap of the water bottle across his chest and starts walking, shoes crunching softly against gravel and fallen leaves. There's a habit he has that shows up most clearly on days like this. A quiet scanning. As if something important might appear just ahead and he doesn't want to miss it. Relief, motivation, a sign that things are finally lining up. He's been waiting for that feeling for a long time. At work, he tells himself things will feel better after the next milestone, after the next paycheck, after the next compliment. In relationships, he waits for reassurance to arrive in the right tone at the right time. He's learned to measure his mood by what's coming toward him, not by what's already here. The trail bends and the sound reaches him before the sight. Water. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a steady moving sound, like a conversation happening nearby that you don't need to join. He follows it instinctively, stepping off the main path onto a smaller one that leads downhill. The stream is narrower than he expected. Clear water moving over smooth stones, catching the light in small, shifting patterns. It doesn't rush. It doesn't pause. It simply keeps going. He crouches and rests his hands on his knees, watching for a moment. There's no sign explaining where it comes from. No marker pointing upstream. It just is. He unscrews the cap of his bottle and dips it into the water, filling it slowly. The bottle grows heavier in his hand. He screws the cap back on and takes a drink. The water is cold, plain, exactly what water is supposed to be. As he straightens up, a thought surfaces, simple and unsettling. How long have I been waiting to be filled? The question isn't accusing, just curious. It lands the way certain truths do, quietly, when you finally stop talking over them. He thinks about the way he's been treating happiness like something that arrives from the outside, something that shows up when conditions are right, when people respond the way he hopes, when circumstances soften enough to allow him to relax. Like a cup held out, always angled forward. The stream doesn't work that way. It doesn't wait to be poured into. It doesn't pause until someone needs it. It moves because there is movement. It flows because something within it is already flowing. He sits on a flat rock by the edge, close enough to feel the coolness rising from the water. His shoulders drop slightly. He hadn't noticed how tight they were. There's a faint embarrassment in realizing how much pressure he's put on other people, on work, on future versions of himself, to supply a feeling he thought was missing. As if peace were a delivery he kept tracking, wondering why it was always delayed. The sound of water keeps going unbothered by his thoughts. He watches leaves drift into the stream, circle briefly in a slow eddy, then continue on. None of them seem to struggle. None of them try to stay where they are. He's been doing the opposite, holding still while waiting for something to arrive, holding his breath in small ways all day long. He takes another sip from the bottle slower this time. The water settles easily. No effort required. It occurs to him that maybe happiness doesn't come from being filled. Maybe it comes from remembering that there's already a source inside one that doesn't depend on timing or approval or outcomes. Not excitement, not constant joy, just a quiet sense of enough. He stands and screws the bottle cap tighter, adjusting the strap again. The stream continues behind him, unchanged by his presence. He doesn't feel like he's learned something new. It feels more like he's stopped overlooking something obvious. As he steps back onto the main trail, his pace is different. Not slower, just less urgent. Like he's no longer racing toward a future moment that's supposed to fix the present. The path curves upward, away from the water, but the sound lingers for a while. Soft, steady. And somewhere beneath his thoughts, something begins to shift. Not because anything was added, but because he's starting to sense what was already flowing. He doesn't leave the trail right away. Instead of turning back toward the parking lot, he keeps walking, following the path as it climbs gently away from the stream. The sound of water fades, replaced by the softer rhythm of his own footsteps. Gravel shifts under his shoes. A bird flutters somewhere overhead, then goes quiet. There's a familiar restlessness in him, even now. A small urge to check his phone, to capture the moment, or at least mark it somehow. He notices the urge and lets it pass. The trail doesn't ask for proof that he's here. As he walks, his mind drifts back to the many ways he's tried to make himself feel complete. Long hours, careful planning, reading the right books, waiting for the right words from the right people. None of it was wrong exactly. It just never lasted. The sense of relief always slipped away, like water poured into a cracked cup. He slows when the path narrows. Up ahead, the trees thin and sunlight filters through in uneven patches. He steps into one of them and stops, feeling the warmth on his face. It's brief. A cloud passes and the light shifts again. The sun didn't stop shining, he thinks. It was just covered for a moment. The thought feels connected to the stream in a way he can't quite explain yet. He spent years believing that happiness is something that happens when life cooperates, when work is manageable, when relationships feel smooth, when there's nothing waiting to go wrong. As if peace requires constant agreement from the world. But the stream didn't ask the rocks to move. It didn't negotiate with fallen branches or uneven ground. It flowed around what was there, shaped by it, but not stopped by it. The movement came from within, not from permission granted outside. He sits on a fallen log and rests his elbows on his knees. The forest is quiet enough now that he can hear his own breathing, in and out. Steady. It surprises him how naturally it finds its rhythm when he stops interfering. A memory surfaces of a time he felt genuinely okay without trying. Not excited, not accomplished, just okay. He can't remember what he was doing then, only that he wasn't waiting for anything to change. That feeling had a source too. He's been treating happiness like a result, when maybe it's more like a current, something you notice when you stop standing in its way. The bottle presses lightly against his side as he shifts. It's still half full. He takes another sip, then sets it down beside him. He doesn't feel the need to finish it. The water will be there when he's thirsty again. That too feels like a small lesson, though he doesn't frame it that way. He stands and continues walking the trail, leveling out as it approaches the end. The sounds of the forest slowly give way to distant traffic, a reminder that the world he left is still waiting. Emails, conversations, responsibilities, none of them have vanished. But something has loosened. He doesn't feel like he has to arrive back there, already filled, already calm, already fixed. He can return as he is, with whatever is flowing naturally and whatever isn't. At the edge of the trail, he pauses and looks back once in the direction of the stream he can no longer hear. He doesn't feel separated from it. The movement it showed him doesn't seem confined to that place. It's in his steps now, in his breath, in the way his thoughts move through and out. He heads toward the car, the bottle tapping lightly against his hip with each step. The sound is steady, almost rhythmic, a reminder that something is already moving with him. He doesn't expect the feeling to last forever. He knows there will be days when he forgets this entirely, when he waits again, when he holds himself like an empty container. But tonight that doesn't matter. Right now he's not waiting to be filled. He's remembering where the flow begins. He keeps a small piece of wood on a shelf in the garage. It started as nothing. A leftover block from a cheap set of shelves he built months ago. The kind of thing most people would toss into the trash without thinking. But he didn't. He slipped it onto the shelf and forgot about it until one Saturday afternoon when he found himself standing in the garage, again restless and slightly annoyed for reasons he couldn't explain. The garage is quiet in a very specific way. No music, no conversation, just the faint tick of the water heater in the corner and the occasional creak of the house settling. The overhead light buzzes softly and dust floats through the air when the door is half open. He pulls the block of wood down and turns it in his hands. It's rough on the edges, splintered in one corner, plain and unfinished. Nothing about it looks valuable. He thinks for a second that it matches the way he's been seeing himself lately. Not broken exactly, just not shaped right, not polished, not the kind of person who seems to move through life cleanly. He has good days, and then days where he slips back into the same habits, the same thoughts, the same quiet disappointment. He sets the wood on the workbench and reaches for sandpaper. The sheet is old and curled at the edges, but it still works. He wraps it around the block and starts rubbing slow at first, then more steady as his arms find a rhythm. The sound is soft and repetitive. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A simple noise that doesn't demand anything from him. He hasn't called it healing. He wouldn't. That word feels too big, too serious. This is just something to do with his hands. Something physical so his mind doesn't have to keep circling the same stories. But the truth is, he's been trying to change. Not in the loud, inspirational way. More like someone quietly rearranging a room so they can breathe again. He's been trying to stop snapping at people when he's tired, trying to drink less, trying to stop scrolling late at night, trying to stop talking to himself like an enemy. He's been trying, and it hasn't been clean. Some mornings he wakes up and feels proud for no reason. Other mornings he wakes up and the weight is back as if nothing changed at all. He'll do well for a week, then slide. He'll make progress, then get frustrated and wonder if he's fooling himself. The sandpaper keeps moving. The wood warms slightly under his hands. Tiny flakes fall onto the workbench, collecting like pale dust. He wipes them away with his palm, then keeps going. There's a thought that's followed him for years, quiet but sharp. If you were really better, it wouldn't take this long. If you were really strong, you wouldn't have to keep working this hard just to feel normal. He presses a little harder, then catches himself and lightens the pressure. Too much force digs, grooves into the surface. He knows that from experience. He's ruined things that way, before convinced that harder meant faster. But harder doesn't always mean better. He pauses and runs his thumb along the edge. It's smoother now, but not perfect. He can still feel roughness where the grain changes direction. He looks at it and feels a familiar urge to judge, to call it not enough, to toss it aside. Instead, he picks it up and turns it again, looking at it from a different angle. The light catches on the parts he's already smoothed. The rest is still raw. It occurs to him gently that he's been doing the same thing to himself. He keeps looking at the rough parts as if they cancel out everything else. He keeps treating the unfinished places like evidence that he shouldn't even be trying, as if being in process is somehow embarrassing. But the wood isn't ashamed of being a block. It doesn't pretend to be a table leg or a picture frame. It doesn't compare itself to the finished shelves nearby. It simply sits here ready to be shaped without hating what it is today. He sets the block down again and resumes sanding slower, more even. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The rhythm steadies his breathing. His shoulders drop. His jaw unclenches. He realizes he's been thinking of himself as the stone-heavy, stubborn, hard to change. But maybe he's also the hands. Maybe he's the one doing the shaping. Not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently in small motions that add up. A car passes outside, tires hissing on the street. The sound fades. The garage remains. He keeps sanding, not because he believes he can become flawless, but because he's starting to believe that gentle work counts. He stops sanding when his arms start to feel it. Not pain, just that low, honest signal that says enough for now. He sets the sandpaper down and stretches his fingers, watching the fine dust cling to his skin. It leaves faint lines in his palm, settling into the creases like it belongs there. For a moment, he considers wiping it off right away. Then he doesn't. He looks at the block of wood again. It's changed. Not dramatically. Anyone else might not even notice. But he does. The edges are softer. The shape feels calmer, somehow less defensive. It's still just a block, but it's no longer fighting his hands. He thinks about how often he's tried to rush himself. How many times he's told himself that by now, he should be different, more disciplined, less reactive, past certain habits, past certain fears, as if there were a finish line he somehow missed, and now he's permanently behind. That pressure has never helped. It's only made him tense, careful in the wrong way, afraid to make mistakes because mistakes feel like proof. He leans back against the workbench and exhales. The garage smells faintly of sawdust and old paint. It's not a comforting smell exactly, just familiar, real. He realizes something that surprises him. Every time he's tried to change himself by force, he's treated himself like a problem to be solved. Something in the way, something resistant. But when he treats himself like material, something workable, something with grain and texture, everything shifts. Material isn't bad for having limits. It just has properties, directions it wants to move, places where it resists, and places where it yields easily. He picks the block up again and runs his thumb along the surface, this time without looking for flaws, just noticing. The places where the grain curves, the places where sanding takes longer, the places that will never be perfectly smooth no matter how much effort he puts in. And suddenly, that feels fine. He's spent years thinking healing meant erasing the rough parts, flattening himself into something universally acceptable, something easier to handle. But sculpting doesn't work that way. You don't remove everything. You remove what doesn't belong to the shape you're uncovering. He sets the block down and switches to a finer grit of sandpaper. The sound changes, softer now, more subtle. The work slows. It requires more attention, less force. This feels closer to how he wants to live. Less dramatic change, more precise care. He thinks about the habits he's been trying to let go of, the ways he pushes himself too hard, the voice that tells him rest is weakness, the urge to become someone else instead of becoming clearer as himself. Maybe those aren't things to smash apart. Maybe they're just excess, old layers that once protected him but don't need to stay. He sands for a few more minutes, then stops again. The block is warm now, almost alive in his hands. He sets it upright on the bench, steps back and looks. It's still unfinished, and that doesn't bother him the way it used to. He doesn't feel the need to complete it today, or to decide what it will become. Shelf support, paperweight, nothing important. The purpose can wait. What matters is that the process feels honest. He brushes the dust off his hands and washes them at the small sink in the corner. The water runs cloudy at first, then clear. He watches it swirl down the drain and disappear. When he turns back, the block of wood sits quietly where he left it. No demand, no expectation. He switches off the overhead light and leaves the garage, closing the door behind him. Inside the house, things look the same as they did before. Couch, lamp, shoes by the door. Life unchanged in any obvious way. But he feels different. Not fixed, not transformed, just less at war with himself. He understands now that he doesn't have to choose between accepting himself and changing. He's always been both the stone and the sculptor. Always shaping, always being shaped. And the work doesn't require cruelty. It requires patience, attention, and the willingness to stop removing things that were never the problem. He sits down and rests his hands on his knees. They feel steady, capable. Tomorrow he might sand again. Or he might not. Either way, the block will still be there. So will he. And for the first time in a long while, that feels like enough. The notebook is still blank. Not completely blank, there are a few words written at the top of the page, crossed out once then twice. The pen rests beside it, uncapped, drying out slowly. He sits at the small desk near the window chair, pulled in close shoulders, slightly forward like he's trying to make himself smaller. Outside, the afternoon moves on without him. Cars pass, someone laughs, a door closes. Ordinary sounds that don't ask him what he's doing with his life. He's been staring at the page for longer than he wants to admit. This was supposed to be the moment things became clearer. The plan, the direction, the answer to the question people keep asking in polite ways, so what's next? He doesn't know. And that feels heavier than it probably should. He taps the pen against the paper, then stops. The tapping makes the silence feel louder. His mind keeps offering suggestions, write something, anything, but none of them feel honest. Every word he considers sounds like a role he'd be stepping into, not a truth he's discovered. He's tired of pretending certainty. On the corner of the desk sits a small block of wood. Pale, smooth in places, rough in others. It came with a cheap shelf he assembled months ago, an extra piece that never found a use. He kept it without knowing why. He picks it up now and turns it in his hands. It doesn't look like much. No markings, no clear purpose. Just a solid, quiet presence. It fits in his palm easily, weight evenly distributed, not asking to be anything more than it already is. He thinks about how uncomfortable people get when they hear he hasn't figured things out yet. How quickly they try to help by offering labels, paths, suggestions, as if being undefined is a problem that needs immediate fixing, as if potential only matters once it's named. He's internalized that discomfort more than he realizes. Every time he pauses, every time he chooses not to rush into a decision, there's a voice that tells him he's falling behind. That being unshaped means being unworthy. The block of wood doesn't seem to care. It doesn't apologize for being unfinished. It doesn't lean toward any particular outcome. It simply exists complete in a way that doesn't depend on form. He sets it down on the desk and looks at it from a distance. In this light, the grain is visible, thin lines running in different directions, subtle variations that would guide any carving done later. The wood already knows how it wants to be shaped. It just hasn't been forced yet. That thought stays with him. He's been treating this in-between space like a failure, like wasted time, like a gap he should rush through to get to the real version of himself waiting on the other side. But maybe this space is doing something important. Maybe not being defined yet is what keeps his options alive. He leans back in the chair and lets it creak. The window is open just enough to let in a cool breeze. It brushes his face, then passes on. No announcement, no demand. He notices how tense his jaw is and lets it loosen. A small shift, nothing dramatic. He's spent years absorbing the idea that worth comes from clarity, from knowing who you are, what you do, where you're going. That uncertainty is something to hide, something temporary, something to overcome as quickly as possible. But the block of wood has no anxiety about its future. It doesn't rush to become a table leg or a frame or a handle. It holds its shape and trusts that when the time comes, it will be shaped in a way that fits its grain. He runs his thumb along one edge, feeling the slight roughness there. Not a flaw, just unfinished. For the first time in a while, he considers the possibility that he doesn't need to decide anything today. That not knowing might be a form of honesty rather than weakness. He looks back at the notebook. The blank page doesn't feel as hostile now. It feels spacious, like a field that hasn't been planted yet, not because it's useless, but because it's waiting for the right season. He closes the notebook without writing another word. Not because he's giving up, because he's allowing something to remain uncut. And that, for now, feels right. He doesn't open the notebook again that evening. Instead, he carries the block of wood with him into the kitchen, setting it down on the counter while he pours a glass of water. It looks slightly out of place there next to everyday things: keys, a folded receipt, a phone charging quietly, but it doesn't seem uncomfortable. Neither does he. He's used to feeling like pauses need to be justified, like stillness has to be productive to be allowed. If he isn't actively choosing, improving, or defining himself, then he must be wasting time. That belief has followed him for years, shaping how he moves through even the smallest gaps in his day. But tonight, there's no urgency pressing against him. He picks up the block again and turns it slowly. The light from the kitchen fixture catches the grain in a different way, now revealing subtle lines he hadn't noticed before. Some run straight. Others curve unexpectedly, changing direction midstream. If someone tried to carve against that grain, the wood would split. It would resist. He thinks about how often he's done exactly that. Chosen paths because they sounded right, not because they felt right. Forced himself into rhythms that looked good from the outside but left him tired and hollow. Pushed through discomfort, not because it led somewhere meaningful, but because stopping felt like failure. He sets the block down and leans against the counter, crossing his arms loosely. There's a faint hum from the refrigerator, steady and unremarkable. The house feels neutral tonight. Not comforting, not cold, just present. It occurs to him that he's been afraid of this stage, not knowing, not being decided, because it doesn't offer quick reassurance. There's no applause for potential, no validation for staying open. And yet, something about this openness feels protective. Once wood is carved, there's no going back. Once a decision is made, it carries momentum. There's shape, direction, expectation. All useful things, all limiting too. The uncut block holds everything. He realizes he's been mistaking pressure for progress, believing that if he doesn't narrow himself quickly, life will pass him by. But life hasn't been waiting impatiently on the other side of certainty. It's been happening all along, right here, in the unremarkable moments he keeps trying to rush through. He moves to the sink and rinses the glass, setting it upside down to dry. Water beads on the counter and spreads into thin temporary lines before disappearing. No trace, no record. And yet the act mattered. He glances back at the block of wood. There's relief in understanding that he doesn't need to be defined to be real. He doesn't need a finished identity to belong to his own life. He's allowed to be in a state of readiness rather than arrival. The thought doesn't solve anything. It simply loosens the grip of the question. Later, he sits on the couch, the block resting on the coffee table in front of him. He doesn't reach for it this time. He lets it be there without interaction. The room dims as the evening settles in shadows stretching quietly across the floor. His phone lights up once with a notification. He checks it, then sets it back down. Whatever it is can wait. There's nothing he needs to respond to about who he's becoming. For the first time in a while, the future doesn't feel like a demand. It feels like space. He leans back and closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the house pipes clicking distant traffic, the low whir of something electrical. Ordinary signals that time is moving, even when he isn't pushing it. He thinks about how much of his worth he's placed on outcomes, on being legible, on being easy to understand, as if mystery were a flaw instead of a phase. But the uncut block is not confused. It is patient. It knows that being untouched is not the same as being empty, that waiting is not the same as stagnation, that there's a difference between refusing to move and allowing things to take shape in their own time. He opens his eyes again and looks around the room. Nothing has changed, and yet the pressure he brought into the evening is no longer sitting where it was. He doesn't feel inspired. He feels permitted. Permitted to be unfinished. Permitted to be undefined. Permitted to trust that when it's time to shape his life, the grain will guide his hands. For now he leaves the block exactly as it is, uncut, unrushed, whole. The wind is stronger than expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady enough to be noticed. It moves through the backyard, brushing past the fence, rustling the leaves of the plants lined up along the edge. Most of them barely respond. A few stiff branches creak and hold their ground. The bamboo does something else. It bends. Not all at once, not in a hurry. The tall green stalks lean with the wind bow slightly, then return to center when the air shifts again. There's no snapping sound, no resistance. Just movement that looks almost practiced. He stands near the back door with a mug of tea cooling in his hands and watches longer than he means to. The day has been full in the quiet way. Meetings that weren't difficult but still required attention. Conversations where he listened more than he spoke. Small decisions that added up. Nothing worth complaining about, yet his chest feels tight anyway. He's used to that feeling. For most of his life, he's believed that being strong meant holding firm, staying solid, keeping everything contained so nothing spills out where it shouldn't. He learned early how to keep his thoughts inside, how to manage reactions, how to be the one people could rely on. Reliable doesn't bend. Reliable doesn't waver. At least that's what he told himself. The bamboo leans again, this time further. A stronger gust passes through, and the stalks bow deeply, almost parallel to the ground. For a split second, he expects to hear something crack. Nothing does. When the wind eases, the bamboo rises back up unchanged. He exhales without realizing he was holding his breath. There's something unsettling about how simple it looks. He's spent years tightening himself against pressure, bracing, locking down emotions before they become visible, filling every quiet space with control so nothing unexpected can enter. He's been praised for it, for being calm, for being steady, for not making things harder than they already are. But lately that steadiness has started to feel heavy. He takes a sip of the tea. It's already lukewarm. He doesn't mind. The warmth spreads anyway. Inside the house, the clock ticks faintly. A dishwasher hums. Ordinary sounds continuing without his input. The world doesn't seem to require his constant grip the way he's assumed it does. Another gust passes through the yard. The bamboo bends again. He notices something he hadn't before. The stalks are hollow. He's seen bamboo cut open before, clean, empty centers running the length of each piece. That emptiness isn't weakness. It's what allows the plant to move without breaking. A solid trunk would snap under this kind of pressure. Hollow space gives room. The thought lands quietly without explanation. He's been filling himself for years, filling silence with answers, filling uncertainty with plans, filling discomfort with effort, as if emptiness were something dangerous that needed to be avoided. But what if the opposite is true? What if the tightness in his chest doesn't come from being too weak, but from being too full? He shifts his weight and leans against the doorframe. His shoulders drop slightly. The sensation surprises him. He didn't tell them to relax. They just did. There are things he carries that don't belong to him anymore. Old expectations. Roles he grew into because they were needed once. Habits of self-control that kept him safe, then slowly became cages. He's never questioned them. Letting go felt irresponsible, like leaving a post unmanned. But the bamboo doesn't guard against the wind. It cooperates with it. Another thought follows softer. Maybe strength isn't about staying rigid. Maybe it's about staying open. The idea doesn't demand action. It doesn't ask him to change anything tonight. It simply creates space. The wind eases. The bamboo stands tall again, green and quiet, as if nothing happened at all. He finishes the tea and sets the mug down on the counter. His hands feel looser, his breathing slower. Nothing dramatic has shifted. No insight he needs to explain later. Just a subtle release. He looks back at the yard one more time. The bamboo waits. The wind will come again, and it will bend again without fear. Something in him recognizes that rhythm, not as a lesson, as a possibility. Later that evening, the wind settles. Not completely. It still moves through the yard now and then, but with less insistence. The bamboo sways more gently, like it's breathing rather than reacting. He sits at the kitchen table with a folded towel in front of him, hands resting on either side. The house is quiet, in the way it only gets after a long day has fully ended. No expectations left hanging. no one needing anything from him right now. He notices how unusual that feels. For years, he's carried the sense that something must always be held in place. A decision, a mood, a situation that could slip if he didn't keep pressure on it. Even in quiet moments, his body stayed alert, prepared to intervene, prepared for what he's never been sure. He looks down at his hands. The skin is dry from washing dishes earlier. Fine lines cross his palms, familiar as a map he's learned to read without thinking. These hands have fixed things, carried things, steadied other people when they needed it. They've also clenched often without permission. He presses his palms flat against the table and feels the solid surface beneath them. It doesn't move. It doesn't need him to brace it. The simple contact sends a small signal through his arms, grounding him in a way that feels new. He realizes that much of his strength has come from holding on, holding opinions steady, holding emotions back, holding himself together when it felt like things might unravel if he didn't. That kind of strength works for a while, but it's tiring. The bamboo outside doesn't look tired. It doesn't accumulate tension. It releases it with every movement. Each bend is temporary. Each return to center happens naturally without effort or self-congratulation. He's never allowed himself that. He's believed that if he loosens his grip even slightly, something important will be lost. That calm depends on constant control. That letting go means letting things fall apart. But nothing fell apart when he stopped watching the yard. Nothing fell apart when he set the mug down and walked away. Nothing fell apart when he leaned instead of braced. The realization isn't comforting at first. It's unsettling. If the world doesn't require his constant tension, then how much of his effort has been unnecessary? He sits with that question for a moment, not trying to answer it. The towel stays folded. The clock ticks. Outside, a light breeze passes through again, and the bamboo responds as it always does. He thinks about the hollow center, about how empty space isn't absence, it's allowance. It's what lets movement pass through without damage. It's what keeps the stalk intact when pressure arrives. He's spent so much time filling himself with responsibility that there's been no room left to bend, no room to feel without fixing, no room to listen without planning a response, no room to rest without guilt. He doesn't need to empty himself completely. He just needs to stop packing himself so tightly. He stands and moves to the sink, rinsing his hands under warm water. The sensation is simple and grounding. Water flows over his skin, then disappears down the drain. Nothing held, nothing saved. He dries his hands and notices how natural the motion feels. Letting go isn't dramatic, it's practical. Back at the table, he sits again, posture easier now. Not slouched, just unforced. His breath moves without instruction, in and out. No commentary. He understands something quietly important. Being open doesn't mean being weak. Being hollow doesn't mean being empty. It means there's space for life to move through without breaking him. The wind outside fades completely now. The bamboo stands still, not rigid, just resting. Tomorrow there will be pressure again. Expectations, conversations, moments that ask something of him. He knows that. The world hasn't changed, but the way he meets it might. He doesn't need to harden to be strong. He doesn't need to brace to be steady. He doesn't need to fill every space to be whole. He turns off the kitchen light and walks down the hallway, the house settling into darkness behind him. The bamboo remains where it is rooted and flexible, ready for whatever comes next. And for the first time in a long while, he feels the same. Not because he's holding himself together, but because he isn't. She stood at the bus stop with her hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders slightly raised against the cold. It wasn't snowing hard. Just a few quiet flakes drifting down slow and unsure, like they hadn't fully decided to land yet. Her shift at the store had ended 10 minutes ago. 8 hours of smiling. 8 hours of folding clothes that weren't hers, fixing displays she didn't care about, answering questions she had already answered 100 times today. Now there was nothing to do but wait. She took her phone out of her pocket. Not because she needed anything, just because her hand moved there on its own. She scrolled without thinking. Someone she knew had posted a photo. A clean apartment, soft lighting, a caption about finally feeling aligned. Another post followed. A promotion, a new relationship, a weekend trip somewhere warm. Her thumb slowed. She didn't feel jealous exactly. It was quieter than that. More like a dull comparison that showed up without asking. They seem ahead. They figured it out. Why do I still feel like this? She locked her phone and stared at the dark glass for a second. Her reflection looked tired. Not dramatic. Just worn down in a way that didn't feel important enough to complain about. The bus was late. A snowflake landed on her sleeve. She didn't brush it away. It sat there for a moment, small, sharp-edged, already melting at the edges. Then another one landed nearby, and another. She lifted her arms slightly, watching them collect. They didn't look the same. One was thicker. One looked almost like a tiny star. Another was barely there at all, more suggestion than shape. She had learned somewhere, maybe in school, maybe online, that no two snowflakes are identical. That even under the same sky, falling through the same cold air, each one forms differently. At the time, it had sounded like a cute fact, something for trivia nights. Standing there now, it felt different. She thought about how often she measured herself using other people as the ruler. Their pace, their timing, their highlight moments. She realized how strange that was. Comparing two people assumed they were meant to be the same thing, formed the same way, meant to land in the same place at the same time. But even snow didn't work like that. Another flake landed on her glove. She watched it dissolve into a tiny dark spot, gone almost as soon as it appeared. It hadn't failed. It had just finished being what it was. She let her arm drop back to her side. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a notification she didn't check. For once, she didn't feel pulled toward it. Her chest felt tight, but not heavy. More like something loosening just a little. She thought about her own days. They didn't look impressive online, no big announcements, no clean captions. But she showed up, She paid her bills. She helped customers find what they needed. She went home tired and still tried again the next morning. There were things she had survived that no one scrolling past her life would ever see. The bus lights appeared down the road faint at first. As it got closer, the snowflakes became harder to see. The glow swallowed them up. But she knew they were still there, still falling, still different. She stepped forward slightly, readying herself to board. For the first time that evening, she felt a small shift inside. Not joy, not relief, just space. Space where comparison usually sat. And in that space, there was no need to be anyone else. She sat by the window on the bus, forehead resting lightly against the cool glass. The city slid by in soft streaks of light and shadow. People around her were quiet. Someone tapped a foot. Someone else scrolled on a phone screen, glowing pale blue in the dark. She didn't feel the urge to look anymore. The bus moved through the snow without drama. No sudden turns, no rush. She watched the flakes hit the window and disappear on contact. Each one lasted only a moment, long enough to arrive, not long enough to be remembered. She wondered when she had started believing that worth had to be visible to count. At some point, she had picked up the idea that if something wasn't noticed, praised, or shared, it didn't really matter. That if no one reacted, then maybe it wasn't real. But the snow didn't seem to agree. It kept falling whether anyone admired it or not. She thought about her own life again. The parts that never made it into conversations. The nights she came home and cooked something simple just to feel taken care of. The mornings she got up even when she didn't feel ready. None of it was loud. None of it asked for approval. And yet, it was still her life. The bus stopped at a red light. Everything paused for a few seconds. In the quiet, she noticed her breathing. Slow, steady. She hadn't done anything to earn that moment of calm. It wasn't a reward. It was just there when she stopped fighting for something else. She realized something gently without force. Maybe she didn't need to add more to herself. Not more achievements. Not a better version. Not a cleaner story. Maybe she only needed to remove the things that weren't hers to carry. Other people's timelines. Other people's definitions of enough. Other people's highlights. The light turned green. The bus moved again. She imagined herself like one of those snowflakes, formed by conditions she didn't choose, shaped by moments she couldn't control, still complete in her own way, not better, not worse, just different. When the bus reached her stop, she stood and pulled the cord. The bell rang soft, ordinary. She stepped down onto the sidewalk. The snow had almost stopped now. Only a few flakes drifted lazily through the streetlight. She took a deep breath before heading home. Nothing about her life had changed in a dramatic way. No problem had been solved. But she felt less crowded inside. And for tonight, that was enough. They stood at the stainless steel sink at the back of the restaurant, sleeves rolled up, the air still warm from the dinner rush. Most of the noise had faded now. No more orders being called. No more clatter of pans. Just water and breath. A crate of vegetables waited on the counter. Carrots, green onions, and a bundle of lotus roots still streaked with dark mud. They picked one up. It was heavier than it looked. Cold. Rough in places where the dirt clung stubbornly to the skin. They turned on the tap. Water hit metal with a steady, familiar sound. Not loud, not quiet, just constant. They began to rinse the root, slowly rubbing the surface with their thumbs. Mud loosened and slid away in thin brown lines, disappearing down the drain. They had cooked lotus root many times before. Sliced thin for stir-fry, thicker for soup. Sometimes fried, sometimes braised. They knew what it looked like inside. Pale, clean, marked with small round holes like a quiet pattern. Still, every time they washed one, the contrast caught them off guard. So much darkness on the outside. Such a clean structure within. Their mind drifted, as it often did during these late moments when the body was busy and the thoughts had room to move. They thought about where they came from, about the parts of their life they didn't usually talk about. The years that felt heavy with mistakes, silence, and choices they didn't know how to explain without flinching. There were things they had buried deep, not because they were evil, just because they were painful. They rinsed again. More mud came off. They remembered how often they felt the need to clean themselves before letting anyone look too closely. As if the mess had to be gone first. As if healing required a perfect story. They had learned early that it was easier to be acceptable than honest. The water kept running. They turned the lotus root in their hands and found a stubborn patch of dirt lodged in a shallow groove. They pressed harder this time, working it loose. For a moment, they wondered why lotus grew this way at all. Why something meant to become a flower had to begin in thick black mud. It seemed unfair. Other plants reached for the sun right away. Lotus had to start where the water was heavy and the light barely reached. They paused, holding the root under the stream. Then it occurred to them quietly, without any drama. The mud wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something the lotus survived despite. It was the condition that made the lotus possible. Without that depth, without that pressure, there would be no flower later on. They felt something soften in their chest. Not relief, not forgiveness, just understanding. They set the cleaned root on the cutting board and picked up the knife. The blade met the surface with a solid, gentle sound. The first slice revealed the inside. White, even, almost delicate. Nothing about it showed where it had come from. They sliced again and again. Each piece fell neatly to the side, identical in structure, calm in its simplicity. They thought about how often they judged themselves by their beginnings, by the mess, by the years that didn't look good when lined up neatly, as if growth was only valid when it started clean. As if beauty was supposed to arrive without passing through anything difficult first. They lined the slices into a small pile. Their hands moved steadily now, practiced and sure. The body knew what to do even when the mind wandered. They realized something then. Maybe they didn't need to erase the mud from their story. Maybe they didn't need to pretend it hadn't been there. Maybe it was enough to know that it had fed something deeper, something solid, something real. They turned off the water. The kitchen felt quieter without it. They looked down at the lotus slices one more time before gathering them up. Clean, ready, and still connected to where they came from. They carried the sliced lotus root over to the stove and set the pan down gently, careful not to rush the moment. The heat was low, just enough to warm the surface without forcing anything to happen too fast. As the pieces met the pan, a soft sound rose up, steady and calm. The kind of sound that didn't demand attention, but filled the space anyway. They stood there, stirring slowly, letting the rhythm guide their breathing. In moments like this, the body remembered things the mind often forgot. That growth didn't happen all at once. That warmth worked better than pressure. That forcing only made things tough. They thought again about the years they had spent trying to outgrow their past by pretending it wasn't there, as if distance alone could erase it, as if time automatically meant healing. But standing here now, they understood something more honest. Healing wasn't about cutting away everything that had been dark or painful. It was about learning how to hold those parts without letting them define every step forward. The lotus root softened as it cooked its sharp edges, rounding out its surface, taking on a gentle sheen. Nothing about it tried to hide where it had been. And yet, it was becoming something nourishing. They felt a quiet shift inside. The parts of their life that had grown in confusion, in struggle, in silence, those parts hadn't ruined them. They had given them depth, sensitivity, a way of seeing what others missed. They had learned patience from waiting, strength from staying, compassion from knowing what it felt like to be misunderstood. These weren't flaws. They were roots. They turned off the heat and let the pan rest, steam lifting slowly into the air. The kitchen felt different now, not because anything had changed, but because they were no longer fighting their own story. They didn't need to rewrite it. They didn't need to clean it up for anyone else. What mattered was how they carried it forward. They plated the lotus root carefully, each slice placed with intention rather than urgency. It didn't have to be perfect. It only had to be honest. As they stepped out of the kitchen and into the cooler night air behind the building, they paused for a moment. The city sounded distant here, softened by walls and space. They took a slow breath and felt the ground under their feet. For the first time in a long while, they didn't feel the urge to escape their past or outrun it. It could stay where it was. It had already done its work, and now it was enough to keep growing. He doesn't realize how tense he is until he turns the faucet off. The kitchen goes quiet all at once, and the sudden silence makes him pause, one hand still resting on the edge of the sink. The overhead light hums faintly. A single drop of water clings to the metal, then falls sharp and clear in the stillness. He stands there longer than necessary, staring at the bottom of the sink where the water has already disappeared. The day has left a residue behind. Not one specific problem, not one dramatic moment, but a buildup of small things. Delays. Comments that landed the wrong way. tasks that took more effort than they should have. None of it feels serious enough to complain about, yet together they sit heavy in his chest. He reaches for a glass from the drying rack and holds it under the faucet again, filling it halfway. The sound of running water is soothing in a way he doesn't question. It's steady, predictable. It doesn't ask him to explain anything. He sets the glass on the counter and leans against it, arms crossed loosely, eyes unfocused. His thoughts begin to line themselves up one after another, as they often do when the house is quiet. They review the day carefully, pausing at moments that still feel sharp. Each thought seems small on its own, but together they create a familiar tightness, like something dissolving slowly inside him. He opens a small container and sprinkles salt into the glass without really thinking about it. The grains disappear almost instantly, leaving the water clear and unchanged to the eye. He lifts the glass, takes a sip, and immediately winces. Too much. The taste spreads across his tongue, sharp and overwhelming, catching him off guard. He swallows anyway, feeling the discomfort settle, then sets the glass down with a quiet clink. He exhales through his nose, half amused, half irritated with himself. That's how it feels lately, he thinks. Like everything has the same flavor. Too intense, too much at once. Even the smallest issue seems to leave a bitter aftertaste that lingers longer than it should. He pours the glass out and rinses it, watching the salty water swirl away down the drain. He refills it this time, adding only a small pinch. He stirs slowly with a spoon, the metal tapping softly against the glass. He tastes it again. Better. Still noticeable, but manageable. He sets the glass down and rests his palms on the counter, staring at the surface, where the overhead light reflects back at him. The reflection is imperfect, slightly warped, but steady. He's always believed that stress comes from what happens to you. From the amount of pressure, the weight of circumstances, the number of problems piling up at once. It feels logical. If things are hard, of course it hurts. But standing here now, he notices something else. The salt didn't change. The glass did. He reaches for a larger pitcher from the cabinet and fills it with water. The sound is deeper this time, fuller. He pours the same amount of salt into it, stirs, and takes a sip. The taste is barely there. It's not gone completely, but it no longer dominates. It no longer demands all his attention. He leans back against the counter, holding the pitcher loosely, feeling its weight in his hands. His breathing slows without instruction, like his body has recognized something before his mind can catch up. The problems of the day haven't disappeared. He knows that. Tomorrow will bring its own version of the same challenges. But the way they sit inside him feels different now. Less concentrated, less urgent. He realizes how often he's been living in a small glass. His days packed tight, his attention narrowed, his mind circling the same thoughts again and again, leaving no room for anything else. In that space, even a little stress has nowhere to go, but straight into him. He pours himself another glass from the pitcher and drinks slowly, this time noticing how the water moves, how it cools his throat, how it settles. The bitterness is faint now, almost unimportant. He stands there letting the moment stretch, not trying to turn it into a lesson or a promise. Just noticing how different it feels to have more room. The kitchen hasn't changed. The light hums the same way. The night outside remains quiet and ordinary. But something inside him has widened. He doesn't rush to clean up. The pitcher stays on the counter, the glass beside it, both catching the soft kitchen light. He leans his hips against the edge and lets his thoughts move without pushing them in any direction. For once, they don't crowd him. A familiar worry drifts into awareness, something unfinished from earlier in the day. Normally, it would tighten his chest immediately, pulling his focus inward until nothing else exists. Now it arrives and settles gently like a grain of salt falling into deep water. It's still there. It just doesn't burn. He notices how his breathing has changed. Slower, fuller, not forced. His shoulders feel less lifted, his jaw unclenched. The shift is subtle but unmistakable, like the difference between holding a cup too tightly and realizing you can loosen your grip without dropping it. He thinks about how often he's tried to solve stress by removing it. Fix the problem. Finish the task. Say the right thing. Move on quickly. Sometimes that works. Often it doesn't. Standing here now, he understands something his body has known longer than his mind. Some things don't need to be removed. They need more space around them. He pours the remaining water from the glass back into the pitcher, then tops it off with more from the faucet. The sound fills the room again, steady and generous. He stirs once slow and deliberate, watching the movement spread evenly. He takes another sip. There's no sharpness now. Just cool water, clean and ordinary. The moment reminds him of other times in his life when stress felt manageable even when things weren't easy. Long walks where his thoughts gradually loosened. Conversations that widened his perspective. Even simple routines that gave his mind something larger to rest in. It was never because the problems disappeared. It was because his inner space grew. He carries the pitcher to the table and sits down, letting the chair scrape softly against the floor. The kitchen feels quieter from here, less like a place to do things and more like a place to be. He doesn't tell himself to think positive thoughts. He doesn't try to replace worries with gratitude or lessons. He simply lets them pass through the wider field of his attention, noticing how they no longer get stuck. A thought arises. Another follows. Then a pause. In that pause, there is relief, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that comes from not being squeezed. He realizes how much of his overthinking has been fueled by constriction. Tight schedules, tight expectations, tight narratives about who he should be and how he should handle things. When the mind is held too tightly, even kindness can feel sharp. He finishes the glass and sets it down empty, now clean and light. The pitcher is still half full. He knows he can come back to it later, refill it again if he wants. That feels comforting in an unexpected way. The night continues outside the window, quiet and unremarkable. No breakthrough arrives. No final understanding clicks into place. And yet he feels different, not fixed, just less crowded. He stands, rinses the glass, and places it upside down in the drying rack. The simple motion feels complete in itself, not a step toward anything else. Before turning off the light, he pauses once more, taking in the room. The counter, the sink, the faint reflection in the dark window. Everything looks the same as it did earlier. Only now there's more room inside him to hold it. He switches off the light and leaves the kitchen, the quiet following him down the hall. His thoughts slow to match his steps, spreading out, no longer competing for attention. Tonight the salt is still there, but the water is wide enough. She notices the crack while waiting for the kettle to boil. It runs diagonally from the corner of the wall down toward the window frame, thin but unmistakable once you see it. She's lived in this apartment for years, walked past this spot every day, and somehow never paid attention to it before tonight. Now, she can't unsee it. The kettle begins to hiss softly behind her, but her eyes stay fixed on the line. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't look dangerous. It's just there, a small interruption in an otherwise smooth wall. She tilts her head slightly, studying it from a different angle, as if perspective might change what it is. The crack doesn't move, it doesn't grow, it doesn't explain itself. Her chest tightens anyway. She tells herself it's nothing. Old buildings settle, walls shift. These things happen. Still, her mind starts filling in gaps she didn't ask it to fill. Questions appear. How long has it been there? Is it getting worse? What if it means something bigger? The kettle clicks off, but she doesn't turn around right away. For most of her life, she's believed that noticing problems early is a strength. You see the flaw, you address it. You prevent something worse from happening later. It's a sensible approach, one that served her well more than once. But standing here now, staring at this small imperfection, she feels the familiar slide from awareness into fixation. She pours hot water into a mug, the steam rising in gentle waves, but her attention keeps drifting back to the wall. Even as she carries the mug to the table, her eyes flick up again, checking to see if the crack looks different. It doesn't. She sits down and wraps her hands around the mug, letting the warmth settle into her palms. The room is quiet in a comforting way. The lamp casts a soft circle of light. Outside, the city hums, faintly distant and steady. The crack sits just at the edge of that circle. She takes a sip and exhales, trying to let the day release its hold on her body. It's been a long one. Nothing terrible, just full. Meetings, small decisions, conversations that required careful attention. By the time she got home, her mind felt stretched thin, like it had been pulled in too many directions at once. And now, here it is again, narrowing itself around one small detail. Her thoughts begin to orbit the crack. Maybe she should take a photo. Maybe she should email the landlord. Maybe this is how bigger problems start. Ignored, minimized, left alone too long. She stands up and walks closer to the wall, mug in hand. Up close, the crack looks less dramatic. The paint around it is intact. The surface is solid. When she presses lightly with her finger, nothing shifts. She steps back. From a distance, the crack blends into the texture of the wall. It doesn't disappear, but it no longer commands her full attention. The room reasserts itself. The table, the chair, the soft shadows in the corners. She notices how her breathing changes when she steps back, how it deepens without effort. The tension in her shoulders eases slightly. That catches her attention. She steps forward again, closer to the wall. Her focus tightens immediately. Her jaw clenches. The crack becomes the center of everything. She steps back once more. Relief. She lets out a small, almost surprised laugh. It isn't the crack that's causing the discomfort, she realizes. It's how close she's been standing to it. How completely she's allowed it to fill her field of view. She returns to the table and sits down, this time angling her chair slightly, so the wall is no longer directly in front of her. The crack is still there, but now it lives among other things instead of replacing them. She sips her tea slowly, noticing its mild bitterness, the way it fades quickly. The warmth spreads through her chest, grounding her in the present moment. She thinks about how often her mind does this. Finds one flaw, one worry, one unfinished thought, and brings it so close that everything else falls away. In that narrowed space, even small imperfections feel overwhelming. The crack hasn't changed. What has changed is where she's standing. She leans back in her chair and lets her gaze wander around the room. The bookshelf she likes. The plant by the window that's still alive despite her forgetfulness. The faint reflection of light on the glass. The room is still good. The crack is still there. Both things can be true. She sits with that realization for a moment, not trying to expand it into a lesson or apply it to anything else yet, just letting it rest where it is simple and unforced. The tea cools slightly in her mug. The night settles deeper around the building, and for the first time since she noticed it, the crack no longer feels urgent. She doesn't fix the crack that night. The thought crosses her mind again briefly, the way it tends to do when something feels unfinished. But instead of acting on it, she lets the thought pass and stays where she is seated at the table with the cooling mug between her hands. The room continues to hold its shape without asking anything of her. She notices how often her mind equates attention with responsibility. If she sees something, she must act. If she notices a flaw, she must correct it. Leaving something alone has always felt like negligence, even when there's no real harm in waiting. Tonight she tests a different response. She stands and walks through the apartment slowly, not to avoid the wall, but to widen her focus. The hallway light casts a gentle glow. The floor creaks softly under her steps. Each small sound reminds her that the space is alive and intact. When she returns to the living room, the crack is still visible, but it no longer pulls her in. It sits quietly among the other textures of the room, just one detail among many. She thinks about how often she's done this to herself. Zoomed in on a single mistake. One awkward conversation, one missed opportunity. She's replayed them until they've grown large enough to eclipse everything else that went right. In that narrowed view, it's easy to forget the larger structure holding it all together. She sits back down and lets her gaze travel around the room again, deliberately slow. The couch where she's fallen asleep watching movies. The lamp that gives off just enough light. The window with its faint reflection of the night. None of these things are perfect, and yet together they create a space that feels safe. The crack doesn't threaten that. Her breathing steadies as the realization settles. It isn't about ignoring problems or pretending flaws don't exist. It's about proportion. About remembering the whole picture instead of letting one small line define it. She lifts the mug and takes the last sip of tea. It's lukewarm now, less comforting than before, but still pleasant. She sets it down and lets her hands rest on the table, fingers relaxed. A thought surfaces, one that usually leads her down a familiar spiral. This time she watches it from a little farther back. She notices its shape, its tone, the way it tries to pull her closer. She doesn't follow. The thought fades, not because she pushed it away, but because there was more room around it. She smiles softly at that. There will be days when she steps too close again. When one small thing fills her entire field of vision and everything else disappears. She knows that. Habits like this don't vanish overnight. But now she knows what helps. She doesn't need to fix everything in order to feel okay. She doesn't need to stand inches away from every imperfection. She can step back. She can widen the frame. The crack will still be there tomorrow. So will the rest of the wall. She turns off the lamp and lets the room fall into a softer darkness. The crack disappears into shadow, not erased, just no longer highlighted. As she walks toward the bedroom, she notices how quiet her mind feels. Not empty, just balanced. Thoughts move through without sticking, like they're no longer looking for something to latch onto. She lies down and pulls the blanket up, feeling its familiar weight settle around her. The room holds steady, unchanged by her letting go. Tonight she doesn't need the wall to be flawless. She just needs to see the whole room. They hear the noise just as they're about to sit down. It's a soft sound, barely more than a shift of air coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Not loud enough to alarm, but distinct enough to interrupt the moment. They pause, one hand still resting on the back of the chair, listening. The place is mostly dark. Only the hallway light is on, casting a long strip of yellow across the floor. The rest of the rooms sit quietly, holding their shapes in shadow. They stand still for a few seconds, letting their eyes adjust, letting their breath slow. Another sound follows, subtle again, like a drawer settling, or a door frame expanding in the night air. Their mind moves faster than their body. Did I leave something open? Did I lock the door properly? What if someone's here? They don't panic, but a familiar tightness gathers in their chest, the kind that arrives before logic has a chance to speak. They reach for the phone in their pocket without looking at it, feeling its solid weight in their hand. They tell themselves it's probably nothing. Old buildings make noise. Wood shifts. Pipes knock. They've lived here long enough to know that. Still, they don't sit down. They walk slowly toward the sound footsteps, careful, controlled. The hallway seems longer than usual, the shadows thicker. Each step forward sharpens their awareness, drawing their thoughts inward. In moments like this, their mind is quick to inventory everything they care about. The things that could be lost. The things that matter. the things they would hate to see taken. But as they move from room to room turning on lights, they realize something strange. There isn't much here. The living room holds a couch, a small table, a shelf with a few books. The bedroom is simple. The closet half empty. The kitchen clean, almost bare. Nothing valuable sits out. Nothing precious is on display. The noise doesn't repeat itself. They stand in the center of the apartment, lights on, now the earlier tension easing into something quieter. The space feels open, unguarded. Not empty in a sad way, just uncluttered. They lower themselves onto the couch and set the phone down beside them. The silence returns steady and unremarkable. Their heart rate slows. They think about how different this feels from other nights, other moments, when a single thought has set off a cascade of worry. Times when their mind raced ahead, protecting imaginary losses, rehearsing reactions, clinging tightly to outcomes that hadn't happened yet. Tonight, there's nothing to rehearse. The apartment doesn't ask them to defend it. There's nothing here that feels fragile enough to break their calm. They lean back and let their head rest against the cushion. The fabric is cool. The air feels still again. It occurs to them how much of their anxiety has worked this way. A sudden thought appears something might go wrong, and immediately their mind fills with things to protect. Expectations, plans, identities, ideas of how life should unfold. The tighter they hold, the more there seems to be at risk. They look around the room again, really look this time. The simplicity feels intentional now, even if it wasn't always meant to be. Fewer objects, fewer reminders, less to lose. A faint smile crosses their face. They've spent years trying to secure their inner world the way people secure their homes. Locks, alarms, constant vigilance, always checking to make sure nothing has been taken. But what if the reason the noise didn't turn into anything was simpler than that? What if there was nothing here for it to take? The thought settles gently, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility. They sit there a little longer, listening to the quiet, noticing how the mind deprived of something to defend begins to relax on its own. Thoughts still appear, but they don't grab hold. They pass through unchallenged. The house remains still, and for the first time in a while, so do they. They don't get up right away. The couch supports their weight without complaint, and the quiet settles in around them like it has decided to stay. Whatever made the noise earlier has resolved itself, or maybe it never meant anything to begin with. Either way, the moment has passed. Their thoughts don't rush to replace it. They notice how different this feels from the usual aftermath of fear. Normally, even after realizing there's no danger, their body stays alert as if it doesn't trust the conclusion. Tonight, the tension fades almost immediately, leaving behind a calm that feels unearned and yet welcome. They look around the room again, slower this time. The shelf holds a few books, well worn, not precious. The table bears faint scratches from daily use. The lamp gives off a soft light that doesn't try to impress. None of it feels like something that needs guarding. They think about how often their mind behaves like a house filled with valuables. Every thought labeled important, every feeling protected, every outcome guarded as if losing it would mean losing something essential. No wonder anxiety shows up like a thief. When the mind is crowded with attachments, there's always something at risk. They shift slightly, pulling one leg up onto the couch, settling into a more comfortable position. The movement feels unguarded, natural. Their breathing deepens, and with it comes a gentle clarity. They recall moments when worry has taken over completely. Nights spent replaying conversations, days spent bracing for outcomes that never arrived. In those moments, their mind was full of expectations, full of imagined losses, full of stories about what must be protected at all costs. The thief had plenty to take. Tonight feels different. There's still responsibility, still care, still a sense of direction. But the tight grip around it all has loosened. The house, so to speak, is simpler now. Fewer locked doors, fewer things stacked in the corners. A thought appears quiet, but familiar. What if something goes wrong tomorrow? They notice it without reacting. The thought lingers briefly, then fades, finding nothing to latch onto. No argument rises to meet it. No counterplan forms. The question simply dissolves unanswered and unneeded. They're surprised by how natural that feels. For a long time, they've believed that worrying is a form of responsibility, that holding on to every possible outcome is how you stay prepared, how you prove you care. Letting go has felt reckless, even immature. But sitting here now, they sense the opposite. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning life. It means not gripping it so tightly that it bruises. They stand and walk through the apartment once more, not to check for danger, but to experience the space as it is. The floor is cool under their feet. The walls feel solid. The air is still. Nothing asks for defense. They turn off a light, then another, leaving only a small glow in the bedroom. As the rooms darken, the apartment feels larger, more spacious, like it's breathing out. They pause in the doorway and look back one last time. The living room holds its quiet shape unchanged by their shifting attention. The earlier fear feels distant now, almost abstract. Not something to analyze, just something that came and went. They realize that peace didn't arrive because they proved the house was safe. It arrived because they stopped guarding something that didn't need guarding. They sit on the edge of the bed and remove their shoes, placing them neatly by the door. The simple ritual grounds them, signals an ending without ceremony. As they lie down, the thought crosses their mind again, faint and curious. What if worry comes back? They smile softly. If it does, it will arrive to an empty house. The lights are off. The doors are open. There's nothing here for it to steal. They pull the blanket up and let the darkness settle, feeling the quiet hold steady inside them. Tonight, nothing is being protected, and nothing is being lost. Wherever you are tonight, I'm grateful you chose to spend this quiet time here. If these stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a gentle place to land. And now, you don't need to do anything more. Let the night hold what you can't carry. And if sleep comes, Let it come.